Muito bem, uma boa noite a todos. É com satisfação que eu apresento para vocês o professor Marzano, que é docente da Universidade de Bérgamo, no norte da Itália, e que foi especialmente convidado, com o apoio do nosso programa de pós-graduação, para discutir hoje o tema da Igreja Católica e do Papado, ou do Papa Francisco. Eu gostaria de mencionar também que esse evento foi possível graças ao apoio de uma colega minha da Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do Sul, a professora Raquel Vaz, que é a responsável pela vinda do professor Marzano ao Brasil e que gentilmente nos avisou da sua estadia, de tal modo que nós ficamos encarregados de transladá-lo de Porto Alegre para Florianópolis. E aí o meu agradecimento ao programa de pós-graduação em Sociologia Política, na pessoa do seu coordenador, o professor Ernesto Zaidel, em ter viabilizado a vinda deste nosso colega especialista em Sociologia da Religião para o Brasil. Nós não temos uma linha de Sociologia da Religião no nosso programa, mas temos diversos colegas que trabalham com esse tema. Um desses colegas está aqui hoje, é o professor Hammurabi, que também pesquisa essa questão. Temos também o professor José Pedro, que é um especialista em espiritismo. Eu mesmo tenho algumas pesquisas na questão mais teórica da secularização, de tal modo que é um prazer ter aqui um colega da Sociologia da Religião, que tem um importante trabalho na Itália e também um importante papel público, né? Obviamente na Itália se discutem bastante as questões da Igreja Católica e do próprio papado, né? Tendo em vista o impacto, obviamente, que essa instituição exerce na sociedade italiana. Obviamente, o nosso interesse hoje nesse tema, discutir o Papa, não é primordialmente um interesse religioso ou teológico. Essa motivação, obviamente, pode estar presente em quem quer ouvir uma avaliação sociológica sobre o Papa, mas, obviamente, é uma preocupação sociológica. Se nós queremos entender o mundo, a sociedade contemporânea, a sociedade global, não podemos fechar os olhos para essa instituição que é eminentemente global. É uma instituição milenar, uma instituição com cerca de 1 bilhão de fiéis pelo mundo, né, e que tem essa característica peculiar de ser governada por um centro político, em cujo epicentro se encontra a figura do Papa. Da mesma forma, o catolicismo, apesar do seu avançado declínio numérico no Brasil, ainda é a religião predominante do ponto de vista estatístico no Brasil, marca a cultura brasileira, de tal modo que nós imaginamos que discutir a Igreja Católica, discutir o perfil do pontificado de Francisco é uma tarefa importante para nós sociólogos também, e tivemos a oportunidade, a sorte, de contar com a presença do professor Marco Marzano aqui no Brasil e agora em Florianópolis. E eu escolhi justamente como título dessa conferência o nome do livro que o professor Marzano publicou na Itália, né? Francisco e como traduz isso, Ernesto? Rivoluzione mancata?
Revolução perdida.
A Revolução Perdida, né? Quer dizer, a Igreja Imóvel, Francisco e a Revolução Perdida, né? Um título provocador que nos convida à reflexão, que nos convida a nos perguntarmos, né, para onde caminha a Igreja Católica com o Papa Francisco. Mas quem vai dissertar sobre isso essa noite e depois vai debater conosco é o professor Marzano, a quem eu imediatamente passo a palavra.
Obrigado. So, first of all, I'm sorry for not speaking Portuguese, but even if I understand much better than when I arrived in the country, so it may be the next time. And thanks for being here, for coming here. Thanks, Professor Carlos Sen, for inviting me, and thanks all of you for being here. Just few words, because I don't want to bore you about that. Just a few words before starting. You know, about my theoretical approach. I study the Catholic Church using, in this case, using an organizational approach and using an organizational theory approach. And in particular, I use the neo-institutional, neo-Weberian approach to power demand. I don't know how much you are familiar with this, but I use this frame of analysis to understand for building my frame. Okay, in our times, at least in the Western world, in Europe, in North America, maybe also in Brazil, the Catholic Church has to deal with many requests for reforms. The requests come from inside the church, the most progressive Catholic sectors, Catholic left, and outside the church, the more general public opinion, which pretends that the old institution adapts itself to the modern values: democracy, freedom of conscience, gender equality, social tolerance, and so on. The two streams, Catholic left and public opinion, partially overlap, since many Catholic leftists are influential opinion makers. Anyway, the request cannot be easily ignored by the church, even if they come from a very secular, for the most secular part of the world, in which people don't go to the church, don't go anymore to Sunday service. Since it is in this part of the world, is in the West, that the church was established. Rome, for instance, is the capital of Catholicism, and it is in Europe. It is from this part of the world, from the West, that the money and the cultural, social, and political legitimation for the church comes. From its part, the church hierarchy as a wall tried to resist, tried not to change at all its structure. And it does so, I think, for very understandable reasons. Reason easy to understand. Why? One, huge bureaucratic organization like the Catholic Church have a natural tendency toward stability. This is very neo-institutional. They change only in front of a big danger, only when challenged from a mortal attack. This is what happened we were talking about that, in the 16th century, at the times of Luther and the Protestant reform, when the Catholicism lost approximately 50% of its population in a few decades. At that time, the response of the church was the Council of Trent. Even if, to be precise, the Emperor Charles V who imposed the Catholic Church a reaction to the Protestant reform, because he had the big troubles with the Protestants in his empire. So that's probably, to be honest, it was not the Pope who decides spontaneously to open the council, but it was the Emperor who pushed him, forced him to do it. But the current situation, the situation of today, is radically different. Even if the Catholic leftists say the opposite, they say that the church is in need of big reform. The situation is very different. The number of Catholics in the world is rising. The number of the priests is slightly rising as well. The number of priests is declining in the West, but they are rising in the South, in the global South of the world. So if you consider them as a whole, the number of priests is slightly rising as well. The number of Baptists is rising in Africa and in Asia. The Catholic Church, the Pope has recently signed a very important agreement with Chinese Communist government, an agreement which will open to the Catholic Church the doors of an incredible, of a big land, and giving so many opportunities. And the Catholic Church is in trouble only in those regions where every religion is in trouble, where religion itself is in trouble, maybe with the exception of Brazil, maybe. But in the secular Western Europe, that's where the Catholic Church is in trouble. In this part of the world, every religion is going bad, very bad, losing adepts year after year, generation after generation. The progressive church, the more liberal, like the Lutheran churches, the Anglican Communion, those who promoted gender equality and accepted gay priests and gay bishops, are going as bad as the more, or maybe worse, than the more traditional Catholic Church. Introducing liberal reforms would not arrest the decline. So reforms for this part of the world are totally useless. They don't stop the decline. And three, those churches like the Anglican Communion, you know, one of the main requests of the reformers is to the reform of Curia. They want a sort of devolution of power in the church. They want more autonomy for the peripheries. No, they want less power for Rome and more power to the peripheries of the world. And the Anglican Communion, those churches like the Anglican Communion that accepted and encouraged internal pluralism are now at serious risk of complete disintegration and explosion. The two wings, liberal and conservative, hate each other, spend a lot of energy in conflicts, producing conflicts and divisions. Like it is evident in the Lambeth conference. They have a 10 years conference in the city of Lambeth in the UK, or those North American territories where we can find two Anglican dioceses in the same territory, one Episcopalian, more liberal, and one affiliated with some African church, more conservative. You can figure out. In the same territory, you have two dioceses belonging to the same communion. One liberal, one conservative, fighting all the time. In the same, so it's a nightmare. You know, the risk of an explosion, of disintegration of the Anglican Communion is a serious risk. So I'm asking, why should the Catholic Church go this way, which is tragic, could be tragic? In the end, for the Catholics, how to solve the dilemma? How can the Catholic hierarchy satisfy the contradictory needs to to legitimize itself in the external environment, and at the same time to preserve intact its structure. How is possible to reconcile, to satisfy the wants of the public opinion when they want reform, and to not to change a structure which it will be irrational and politically difficult to do. I think, hello, it's a big group. They're coming from another class. Please. Please, have a seat. I think that in the last 6 years, Pope Francis represented the response that the Catholic Church has given to this question. Now I tell you why. Indeed, the resignation of the conservative German Pope, conservative, I don't think this is the right word, but we will talk about later. The conservative German Pope Benedict and the election of Pope Francis as probably the election of every new Pope in the past. It happened also with Pio IX, who was one of the most conservative, anti-modern Pope, and his election was seen as a sign of a revolution, of the beginning of a new era. So excited the spirits, raised the expectation of millions of people all over the world for the start of a new season for the Church. But the Catholic left, the two streams, remember, Catholic left in Western public opinion hoped that the time of a real and deep change of the Catholicism had finally come. That Bergoglio would have been the revolutionary leader of Catholicism, who the world had been waiting for a long time. Immediately, since the night of his election, the new Pope alleged revolutionary virtues began to be celebrated and magnified. From the moment in which he appeared on the St. Peter's balcony, saying Buonasera. This revolution, Buonasera. He said Buonasera. on the contrary, all the elements, as I will tell you later, it will be clear later. All the elements of continuity were forgotten or ignorant. The Pope Francis, for his part, initially explicitly encouraged the hope for a big change. This is what he did. He did so with some symbolic gestures, just to mention a few. Then he decided to call himself Francis, to present himself as the Bishop of Rome and not a universal pontifex, to live in Santa Marta, which to be honest is not slum, it's not a favela. But anyway, to wear all, it's a nice place in the Vatican. I've been there. To wear old shoes instead of the famous Ratzinger's Prada red shoes. You remember the famous red shoes. To carry himself, his old bag, and so on. So many other symbolic gestures. And with some explicit announcement. The most relevant ones were those contained in the apostolic exhortation Evangelii Gaudium, which was his political manifesto, full of explicit announcement of an incoming reform, big reform. Year after year, the revolutionary energy of Francis has decreased. It has diminished. Passing from words to deeds, that Francis Papacy was not able to follow with any of these premises. Nothing. He didn't reform. He didn't reform the church. Now I give you more detail. But I want to be explicit about what I mean by reforms. I'm concerned here about those reforms that change the balance of power between groups and individual in organization, and particularly between center and the periphery, men and women, clerics and lay people. These are reforms. The real reforms are the ones who affect the distribution of power. This is a very political approach. But Francis was not able to, as I told you, to reform the Curia. He announced a big reform of the Curia, and he didn't. He was not able to reform the Curia, which means which is the governance system of the Catholic Church. What the reformer asked on this topic is the end, as I told you, of Roman centralism, the evolution of power to the local churches. In the Catholic language, this is called synodality. He promised synodality, but he didn't. He was not able to do it. Second, he was not interested at all in empowering women in the church. The only concrete decision he made in this field was to establish an historical commission on the feminine diaconate. Everybody knows in the Catholic environment that in the Vatican language, when something is merely historical, it means that it entered a blind line, that nothing will follow. It's historical is a way to say, okay. It means something like academical. It means just talking, just not change. He didn't change any part of the Catholic doctrine on sexuality and affectivity. The only small innovation he promoted was to give, as you probably know, in some very specific situation, to the divorced and remarried Catholics the possibility to receive the Holy Communion. But there are scholars who say that Benedict had this in mind. That was a Benedict project. So there is absolute continuity on this field. And probably the most important one, he has not changed the discipline of mandatory celibacy, which is the most important rule of engagement for the Catholic elite, in which so many trouble has brought, many trouble will bring to the organization in the next future. We can talk about pedophilia and all these scandals related to mandatory celibacy, even if today the former Pope Ratzinger said that this is not true in an important document he published in the German journal. The miracle for the Catholic Church is that even he has failed as reformer, for me has failed completely, 100%. Even he didn't change anything in the organizational structure of the Catholic Church. Even it is perfectly clear that he is in continuity with the Pope who came before him. Francis is still perceived by the global public opinion as a great reformer, as a revolutionary man. How did it happen? Answering this question is not easy, and it evokes the role that the media have played in this game. in sum, very briefly, I think that what happened, mainly thanks to the media, to the Pope and the media, is a sort of mass distraction, which is a social process that reminds me, as sociologist, that of decoupling. The concept of decoupling has been used by an institutional scholar in organizational theory to indicate the creation and maintenance of gaps between formal policies and actual organizational practices. I don't know how much you are familiar with new institutional language. Just to give an example of what decoupling means, think the introduction of the credit system in the academic world. I don't know if you use the credit system. You pass to the system of credit, okay? In Brazil? Yeah, years ago, probably. This is from a new institutional point. This is a formal policy. There's no change in the reality of teaching process in the university, and but that it gave the impression that everything has changed. You know, and decoupling is very useful for the legitimation of the organization, because the organization need to satisfy the pressure coming from the environment, and to give the impression to the environment that they elaborate new ideas. They have a new approach because the world is changing. The world needs a new approach. They update the system. So decoupling is very useful because you change the surface, satisfying the environment, but you don't change the core of the organization. You preserve the core of the organization. You protect. Changing the surface, you protect the core. The core, it means the things, the way we do what we do. I think the decoupling is not the only strategy that organizational leaders use to obtain social legitimation, keeping their organization immobile. Mass distraction is an alternative. You can use decoupling. You can, for instance, you can invent new structures to, I think I can give you another example. You are a millionaire, doing a lot of, making a lot of money with, with very polluting activities. You invent a new foundation for the help of poor people in northeast of Brazil. You distract. No, you try to decenter the attention of the public opinion from your core activities, because your core activities is industrial activities, very, very polluting. And you invent something new. Mass distraction is another thing. It's an alternative. In the case of the Catholic Church, the coupling happened between the leader, the Pope, Francis, and the rest of the organization. Francis was able to divert public opinion attention from the reform of the Church to other topics, like 1. Social and political issues, migration, poverty, capitalism, social inequalities. Francis talks a lot about this issue. Maybe that someone in and out of the organization, especially in the US probably, is irritated by this. But it's nothing really new, since Francis is, even in this field, in perfect continuity with the social doctrine of the Church. There's nothing new in what he's saying. In the history of the church, the attention to this topic varies according to the political and social moment. I remember, I don't know if you remember when just, I think 1 year after the collapse of communism, the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1990, if I'm not wrong, John Paul II published the Centesimus Annus, which was a social encyclica dedicated to a very fierce critique of capitalism. So it depends on the social contingency, on the social, political, and social moment. So why he did so? Because he perfectly realized, that the capitalism was becoming the new enemy. Catholic never liked capitalism, never. It's something very far from the Catholic culture. It evokes democracy, market, liberal values, and so the alliance between capitalism and Catholicism was temporary, strategic, opportunistic. After the end of the big enemy, the communism, the evil, the worst of the worst, he immediately, because he was a great pope, of course, he turned his attention to the capitalism. Anyway, the main advantage that the church has in this case, talking about social and political issues, is that the church is not a political organization. It's not a state. It's not a political party. And so for it accountability is not a problem. The Pope could denounce everything. He could say that this is right and this is wrong, and he will never pay the political consequence of his declaration, because he will never be in position of a real political leader. He's not responsible. He's not accountable. He's not like, your president, our president, Trump. So they can make promise, but they have to act. At the end, they will receive, they will be judged for what they did, not only for what they said. The Pope is not his problem, because he can talk a lot about, pollution and the problem of the poverty, but he's not responsible. So it's very good for him to talk about that. Because no one could say, oh, you promised this and then you were not consequential. Because he couldn't be consequential. Second strategy to divert, to distract. His enemies. His enemies in the Curia and in the church. In this field, the media, as you know, the media are always looking for some exciting stories created. That's natural. They need stories. They need plots. And they created the plot. The plot about Francis is this. The Pope is God's man. He's a saint. He's full of good intentions. But unfortunately, he's surrounded by evil villains. The wolves. He used this expression. He reminds Francis, the Saint Francis language, but he used me and the wolves around me. The wolves, the bad cardinals, who constantly and wickedly try to impede him to do the right things and to change the church. I think this story is completely imaginary. It's not real. And it reminds me, if I can, I take this from the anthropology James Scott book on the art of the dominion and the art of resistance, or something like the anarchist. He's an anarchist, nice anthropologist. The famous story told by Lenin, Vladimir Ilyich. I know that sounds strange to quote him, but about the myth of the good Tsar of the Russia. The myth tells that the Tsar was good, and that he loves the poor people, but unfortunately he's surrounded by evil men, his cart, who try to stop his good action. The Tsar wish to help people, but unfortunately he's surrounded by these bad people that impede him to reach the... There are no evidence of a conflict in the Vatican around ideological issues. No one single evidence. Of course, there are some conflicts in the elite of the Catholic Church, like in every organization, but those conflicts don't have an ideological connotation. They are not conflict between the right and the left. There's no right and left in the elite. This sounds very elitist. In an organization like the Catholic Church, right and left are something good for the people, not for the elites. The elite is not divided in the right and the left. The elite is one and compact, and the one between the right and left is not the cleavage that dominates the Vatican politics. Many people support Francis or are against him for personal reasons. Of course, there are conflicts of power between individual member of the elite or between groups, but not ideological, not between the right and the left, between group who want to reform and another group who doesn't want to reform. Third point, Francis was such a new and fresh figure that quickly became a star, a pop star, if you want to, it's a joke, for the international press. So new, so fresh. He's Argentinian, and probably the first world leader coming from Argentina. No, probably. Argentina is an important country, of course, but we didn't have so many world leaders coming from Argentina. He comes from almost the end of the world, as he said. He brought a new language, really new language, new metaphors, a new spirit in the global communication. And it has been enough for the media. It's been enough. They are not anymore looking at the reform of the church. Reform of the church is a boring thing. Not, come si dice, notiziabile.
It's not good for
the exactly, not exciting for the news. It's too complicated. No, he was so smart, in a way, so new, with his Spanish accent, so lovely, especially compared to the German accent of the poor president, which Benedict was so a nice man, and also with a bad German. That's the problem. They have the Pope now, and it's enough. The Pope is personally different, of course, from his predecessors, physically, linguistically, and culturally different, and it's enough. The media, if you look with the the media regularly consider his statement as synonyms of action. If the Pope say, who am I to judge an homosexual who respect, which was an innocent phrase, inspired by the Catechism, as he said later, for the media, it means that the Church has recognized the homosexuality, which was clearly not true, and they forgot the fact that quite recently he said that homosexuality, the homosexual could be cured when they are kids, when they are children. If you take the homosexuality in time, when people are young, you can curing homosexuality, not curing homosexuality. You can transform an homosexual in a heterosexual. And then he said many other times that the seminars should be not accessible to gay people. Should be. So, and many other things, but media ignore these statements. And they emphasize just one phrase in the airplane, so who am I to judge? I don't know because I don't know him personally, I cannot say if he said this intentionally or not, if it was strategic but anyway, or another short example, if they say, if he said that years ago he referred once or twice to a therapist, it means that the Catholic Church recognized the psychoanalysis, which is another thing. It's not true, and so on. There are many other examples of this. A phrase, statement pronounced by the Pope becomes the announcement of a real change, which is clearly not true. The media systematically obscure the most infamous words and action of the Pope, and on the contrary celebrate the incredible novelty of the most ambiguous ones. Just to give you a last example, 2 weeks ago, in Italy, we had an international meeting, it's called Congress of the Family, which was an anti-gender, homophobic, great meeting in Verona. And the journalist asked the Pope judgment about this, and he said, I agree with the substance, but not with the method. What do you think? Think he agreed with the substance? No, with the method in the sense that he doesn't like exaggeration, because of course the Congress was full of crazy people saying that the homosexuals should be killed and things like that. So of course, as a Catholic, as every Catholic probably, starting from the last of the priest, they don't like the exaggeration, they don't like people crying, but he agreed with the substance, the defense of traditional family, the anti-gender, the exclusion of the denial of no rights for homosexual couples, and so on. And media say the Pope disapproves, he's against the Congress. How can you say that? It's incredible. They have a positive, they have a frame, they follow a frame in which, they create an imaginary Pope. A Pope who said and who did what they want to hear and to see from him, I think. I'm concluding. I don't know how long I told them. It's okay. The truth, for me, my truth, I'm not Benedict, is that Francis is exactly the opposite as a political leader, because he is a political leader. You have to keep in mind that he talks about gospel and Jesus Christ for 20 minutes a day. For the rest of his day, he talks about politics. Of course, because he's the leader of a global organization. And he has, I don't know how you say, Nunzio Apostolico. Yeah, Nunzio Apostolico. He probably meet tens of Nunzio Apostolico every day, head of a state. He knows everything about the political situation of Cameroon or Syria. He talks a lot about Russia and the role of Putin in the war. He is a political leader. He is the leader of an organization of 1 billion and 200 million of believers, with 500,000 of priests, with an enormous huge number of material resources. So he's a leader. As a leader, for me, Francis is exactly the opposite of a reformer, since he's the Pope of the reconciliation. The Pope of amitié, of friendship. Come si dice in portoghese? Reconciliazione, esatto, della riconciliazione. I think he will be remembered, I don't know when, but as the Catholic sovereign who promoted the end of the long conflict season in the Catholicism. The season started during the Council of Vatican II and lasted until the papacy of Benedict. Francis ended the season. He has been able to bring back into the church because, why? Because the time has come. Not because Benedict was against this, but because the time has finally come. Historical time has come. The theology of liberation, Gutierrez and Santified Romero, but also the schismatic far right of the followers of Monsignor Lefebvre. Far right and far left. Francis he reunited them in the name of the continuity and of the celebrating the power of the church, of one single Catholic church. Who is more Catholic than this man? How can people say he's not Catholic? He is the most Catholic you can imagine. Francis is the man, I'm finishing, who on one side signed with the Russian Patriarch Kirill, the head of the Orthodox Russian Church, very close to Vladimir Putin, a paper full in Cuba. They signed a paper full of homophobia, misogyny, and so on. On the other side, he went to Lund to celebrate the Protestant reform of the Lutherans. So it could be open to the right, open to the left. Probably it was also so personally. Someone told me this anecdote, that that one of his most aggressive enemy was the Cardinal Caffarra, the former Cardinal of Bologna, the Bishop of Bologna, one of the 4 sottoscrittori of the writers of the document of Dubia against him after, and they met in Carpi near Bologna. They unexpectedly met. And Caffarra was so rigid, looking at him, saying to them, and he was so open. He asked him, "Oh, I'm so happy to see you," because even if he's probably he has a very easy temper, he's probably someone said sometimes it's just copy it up, it's rage, but his political line is friendship, reconciliation, and he could succeed in the reconciliation because the age of the conflict and separation is over. That's why. And because it's a new man, because Benedict and John Paul II they were the main protagonists of the era of conflict. They had to do what they did in order to save the church. And at that time, Bergoglio was on their side. I remind you that Francis was appointed as bishop and cardinal by John Paul II. Then he was not pro, but against theology of liberation in the 70s and in the 80s. And now the time has come. A new time. The age of the conflict and separation is over, and the church could welcome the prodigal son, the old protesters, return with open arms, because the sons are old and not in good health. Theology of liberation. What is left of theology of liberation? What is left of the tradition of Lefebvre? Nothing. Very, very few, very small group, very marginal. Not that they used to be in the 70s, in the 60s and the 70s. And they have lost their energy. They don't represent anymore a danger for the church. So they could be accepted. They could be accepted for the good of the institution, of the continuity of the institution. This is how the organization could save himself. The great question now is, who will be the next? What will the Catholic leader hierarchy invent as successor of Francis? Who will be the successor? Because it could be the Francis' success could be also a trap, because he was so successful. But he is 80, almost 80, 83, 84. He is in good health, but probably I don't know if he will survive for a century or something. I don't know. And the problem is what they will invent for producing such a new distraction, a new strategy, which strategy they will figure out to avoid the reform, the main danger of a reform of the Catholic Church. Okay, thank you. Obrigado.